Yeah, I guess it took a Florida State team this bad for Mac Brown to finally win a game against
Oh
FSU.
my goodness.
This is what it took.
That picture of him with his hands on, Mike Norvell's shoulders and like pretty much consoling him in like a 5-minute conversation. Like it really, I mean, you saw that going on in pregame and you knew you had no chance. Really tough spot for Mike Norvell. You try not to hammer on him, but at this point in the season, it's what I've told our audience. The reason we're not doing a ton of shows, like I'm not in the business of just crapping all over my program. But you're to a point now in the season where you want to talk about lame duck. That's what's going. The offense isn't trending the right way. It's getting worse. Everything has got worse since Georgia Tech. Worse, worse, worse. You get the one win. You piled up this roster. You lost a ton of guys to the NFL. You come into year 5. You talk about the strongest, the fastest. Could have won 4, 5, 6 games, and the conversation's a little different. But everything you've built up over that time period, all the relationships you built, all the momentum, the reputation of your program, it's all gone. It's all gone. It's like, the Rocky movies. Everybody loves Rocky. Rocky 1, he comes from the streets. His coach, gets his wife in a good house. Rocky 2, he's making millions. Rocky 3, the house is getting bigger, and then he loses it all. And he goes down. He's just old, beat up Rocky, and he has to fight his way back to the top. Beats the Russian, all that stuff. Like that's where Florida State is. They're not Rocky on top of the world with a heavyweight belt, being like, okay, now we can get this 5-star, and they've just got to be able to go out there and scrap. And that was the issue with this staff from day one. It was never that staff. It came along during COVID 2021. Like you can't ignore that. That happened. But at the same time, you've got to have guys that can come in and recruit, regardless of the record, regardless of anything. They just have to be recruiters. And it's just not there. So some changes have to come. And there's just, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we, go crazy and beat Notre Dame, or maybe can take Florida because they do have issues, even though they are looking to get better and better, have been getting better week by week. You got about 3 options. The nuclear one, fire Mike Norvell. I don't think anybody really believes that with the $65 million tag on his head. But it's a conversation to be had now that you're 1-8, headed for 1-9, looking at 1-10 since the Georgia game. However you want to talk about it, you can't. When it goes that bad, you have to discuss it. People floating Deion Sanders' name out there, Lane Kiffin, things of that nature. I just don't know if Deion is a long-term college football coach, even any kind of coach. Will he go try to follow us under the NFL? I will give Deion his props. He's done a lot better this year than I thought. Although I think kind of what I thought about the Big 12's strength of schedule and the depth of that conference is also, a lot lower than people realize. But yeah, he's killing it. He's doing a good job. Could he possibly do it at FSU as a CEO? Maybe. I just don't believe he has the dedication or is that into it and invested into college football to want to come to Florida State and make a 5-10 year commitment to do all this stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong about him before. So we'll see. That's the least likely nuclear option. Not many people think he's going to get fired this year. The other two is, an overhaul of staff. You do a complete overhaul, a heavy overhaul, or are they just going to get rid of 1 or 2 coaches and try to just, okay, they went 13-0. We're giving them benefit of the doubt. This is just a bad year. I don't think that's an option. I think if that happens, if they just change a couple coaches, give them the benefit of the doubt, just roll with Mike, and he did it once, he can do it again. It's the beginning of the end. I truly believe he can. He could come win 6 games and then 10 games, but this is Florida State. Like that's okay at Memphis or, Indiana, wherever else. At Florida State, the standard is higher. So you're in a position now where you have got to change the staff up and to be able to strike a balance of guys that are young, guys that go get it and go recruit. Right now, we've just got a bunch of youth ministers just all over the team. And there's this whole thing about wanting to get good people, people that don't drink, and virgins, and this whole kind of narrative around the culture and everything around this team. Like I loved it. I was proud to be a part of it. I love how spiritual they are. They break down in like groups to do prayers and stuff before practices and games and everything like that. But there is a level of college football that you just kind of have to play in the gray areas. You have to find a guy who maybe isn't a good kid, or maybe is a good kid, but he's got something terrible going on at home, so he's in trouble. You've got to go help that guy and figure out how you can get him into your program and make it work. And not even so much that the tip top guys, the Jeremiah Smiths, I think they're so good and so far removed from the streets or anything, but that's another part of it. You've got to be able to go get the tip top athletes and sell them. You have to really sell them. It's like, when you're trying to, hire an actor or something, and you bring them to the studio, and you've got all the famous actors that you employ, all your best agents, all your best food out there. That's what these recruitment trips are. And the hard sell of, this is what you're doing wrong, and this is what we can do for you here. That doesn't work when you put on the film and see what these receivers are doing. And it's real easy to point at just this year, but it was the same in 2020, 21. Then you finally get the portal guys in 22 and 23. Recruiting, it's got to be fixed. I made the argument last night on my show, like there's a chance this could have worked, because they did, due to COVID, due to their nature, all those things, they built up to where this 2025 recruiting class, it was going to be a top 10 class. Make no mistake. They had 2 top 100 D-line and offensive linemen committed. They had 3 top 25 wide receivers, 14 or 15 commits, and it was 99% blue chips. Like they were on the way, and that was before the season or at the beginning of the season. But that was all built up due to a program in 4 years. That's out the window. And this staff has proven over and over and over and over again, they cannot go out there and sell recruiting to Florida State just on the logo. Like they have to have a good team behind them. It's just how it is. They've missed on so many top guys, getting flipped at the last second. To this point, they fixed it in the portal. But, this team can turn it around. They can do this, they can do that, but there are no more excuses left. And it's just tough listening to the way that Mike talks. He's giving you the coach talk thing of like everybody's trying their best, and we're not going to let any coaches go, because I think the best thing to do is to coach these guys every day. And I've seen it happen over my whole career. And it's like, we get it. And I trust you, and that's what you got to do. But at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. At some point, like, okay, how much worse could it get? How much better are you expecting it to get? I'm not one of these people that says you have to fire the coaches now to get ahead of it. I don't know how much that helps you firing the coaches before the end of the season, because all the good teams' coaches aren't leaving early. So, you can't hire them until they're done. But, I would like to see him maybe, I don't know, get on a coach's ass in a press conference, pick out a player to really get on him. We've talked all year about on the sidelines how usually he's animated, tearing people up, ripping them, this and that. But, whether it was the college football playoff, whether, the snub, whether it was getting beat by Georgia and all those guys deciding not to play, whatever it is, something broke this staff. They lost sight of the evaluation and kind of what's going on in the rest of the country. To hear Alex Atkins talking about he's got to go back to square one and relook at all his evaluations and stuff. You've been with these guys for 5 years. Like, these are your guys. They got 13,000 snaps, and you misevaluated them all. Jordan Travis, it's something that you've known me for a couple of years now, Mark. How much did I talk about how people don't realize how much Jordan Travis leveraged that line of scrimmage and put defenses in binds? Like, he didn't even have to run the ball. It's just the fact of that he could on third down or whatever the case may be. It made the blocks for all those guys better. And even when they had breakdowns, he would make these crazy escapes. But at the same time, in 2022, you had a decent run game, bit of a step back last year, but also guys all just terribly hurt. Was that luck? Turns out, no. That's just the shape. These are just the bodies we have. There was a lot of hope. It was built up that we were going to have that 22 run game maybe a little better. You're super, seniors across the board on the offensive line, and it just hasn't been. You missed on quarterback. You missed on several things. We can go over that all day long, but yeah, don't look for hope. Anybody that's telling you this or that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, it's just pretty much BS. But there's a lot of conversation and posturing on, what's going to happen. Which change will it be? They're going to change the head coach. They're going to change 2 or 3 guys. They're going to change 4 or 5 guys. I guess the next thing would be, like, what's been holding back these coaching decisions? Like, How come Shannon kept his job for all these years? How come they didn't? How come it was only Woodson? There's so many questions. Is it the administration saying, Mike, you can't fire these guys? Mike, you can't hire these guys? Or is it Mike telling the administration, no, I want to keep these guys? If it's Mike that said that, and Mike is the one that's calling the shots, Mike is the one that gets to decide how many coaches leave, et cetera, I'm not in too bad of a mood about the program. Like, we can get the right coach in there and fix it. If Michael Alford is getting pressured by administration and boosters and things of that nature, that we have to keep Dugans, we have to keep Hagens, we're only going to make so many changes, and we're not going to give Mike the ability to make these changes, then FSU, it's really bad. You're looking at Cleveland Brown stuff, and it's really scary, because all this came to a head in 2017. Michael Alford took over the boosters after Norvell left, or after Fisher left. He eventually isn't like they hired him as the athletic director while he was the head of the boosters. He went straight from there over. It was my belief from people I talked to him, what I thought, that he revolutionized the booster system. Back in the old days, the boosters had all the power. It wasn't really the AD and the head coach. Like, when it came to coaches and things like that, outside of Bobby in his prime, like, Jimbo did not have that. It was like, oh, this is how much you get for this. And that was a huge problem. So I thought we were past that. I thought Michael Alford could see farther ahead and like knew what it takes, and I still do. I think that's BS. But if that narrative comes out, and you only change one or two coaches, and it turns out you didn't have the money, or you weren't willing to do this or that, that's truly scary. I don't think that's what it is, but that would certainly be a huge problem.
So if you were going to keep any of these guys, like, who do you think? Is there anybody on this coaching staff, either one of the coordinators, that you think, maybe even if they're not having a great season this year and haven't been able to get the most out of their unit this season, that they've shown in the past that, yeah, we can do an overhaul, but I'd like to hang on to that guy or that guy?
Yeah, and this lands right on kind of my preferred scenario. In my heart of hearts, I would prefer Mike to stay and wipe it all out, hire 2 new coordinators, the whole 9 yards. But
Okay.
in my mind tells me that's not going to happen. But what my hope is that it'll land somewhere in the middle with 4 or 5 guys to be replaced. I brought up earlier about how you have basically the same guy outside of Pat Surtain at every position, same recruiting style, that youth prime minister, really nice, not going to say the S word or the F word and all that stuff. Not to hate on that type of person. You might fall in that category. I love it. But I'm sure you're probably wouldn't be happy to go to these different high schools and have to kiss these high schools kids' butts, for 80 hours a week when you're also a football coach. And I don't think Odell does either, and that's fine. But the big thing is, I think basically anybody could go, but the people at the top of the list are going to be Randy Shannon on defense, Ron Dugans on offense. Those are the 2 tip top guys who, like, it's pretty cut and clear. They're gone. But the important part to me is that you do bring in those young, hot recruiter type guys. You have to. There has to be some kind of balance. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is, you need somebody to hold the other count. Like, whatever coaches remain, you need at least half guys to come in, 4 or 5, to hold them accountable. Because there is a blindness in this program between Mike Norvell and all his guys, whether it's because he delegated responsibility to the offensive, defensive staff and they let him down, or it's all his fault, whether it's the general manager and the recruiting efforts that misevaluated. So, yeah, that's for me why it would be a nightmare if they only changed 1 or 2, because you have to at least change half to bring some accountability. You can't bring a couple yes men in there, or nothing's going to change. Nothing. So I gave you the first 2. The next 2 or 3 are the toughest. On offense, Alex Atkins has a show clause for the next 2 years because of the recruiting thing. So it's going to be hard for Mike Norvell to find a position where he lands on his feet in a good spot. It's a big point of contention. Alex, Mike, they're super tight. People aren't really expecting him to leave. But what I do expect out of him, if he's going to remain, in my scenario, what needs to happen, if you're going to hire 4 or 5 coaches, you're going to have to bump him down to an offensive line coach or a run game coordinator. And then you're going to have to bring in an offensive coordinator. Brendan Marion, UNLV, is just a popular example. Who knows who it will be. But if you could bring him in, passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator, you have Alex Atkins The next two on the chopping block are going to be Chris Thompson and Yak. Out of those two, personally, I think Chris Thompson would be the guy to go. And then over on defense, we're at 3 right now with those guys. Your fourth and fifth guy, Odell. Like, what do you do with Odell? It's like, and this is one of the rumors out there that the administration has told Mike he's not allowed to fire Odell. He's going to stay just as long as he wants. If that's true, I've got a legitimate problem. And it's like Cleveland Brown stuff, because it's like, you've already made it through 3 coaching staffs. Like, how much of a benefit of the doubt do you need? Like, coaching them up and doing this and that, that's great. You're coaching up who you have every year, but somebody has to recruit them, unless you're going to hire a 3rd defensive line coach. Papucci's, he's coached his guys up, and it's a similar thing. It's like, you can't have 2 guys that just coach and don't recruit. So whether it's Papuchis or Odell that gets gone, you're going to have to bring in a guy with that swag, with that young kind of thing on defensive line. The linebacker coach, the dream guy, would obviously be Derek Nicholson from Miami. But I already said Pat Surtain. He looks great. There's rumors of him going elsewhere, or he could possibly be that 5th coach because he's going to the NFL or gets an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator job at a bigger school. But yeah, I think for the most part, the guys that I wouldn't expect to go that are actually safe, right or wrong, I think Adam Fuller stays. Yak has a good chance to stay. Obviously, Mike Norvell, and then one of the 2 of Odell and Papuchis. My personally, I prefer it to be Papuchis and just move him to special teams coordinator, or really the same position. He can be special teams / D ends, and I want him to bring in a defensive line coach. You know, somebody that coaches the whole defensive line, recruits the whole defensive line, is an ace recruiter. Somebody like Brad Long back in the day, yada yada. But yeah, if you don't, if that stuff about Dugans and Odell is true, and you only get rid of 1 or 2 coaches, yeah, bad news bears. I want to give FSU, Michael Alford, the administration, Mike Norvell, more credit than that. But these coaches are so set in their ways, and you know, you build up this faith of building a program and your whole book of how you do things over 20 years. We've seen it time and time again. Nick Saban is the only one. Nick Saban, and I'll give Jim Harbaugh a bit of credit because he did change his staff up. He went back to his original thing. He kind of changed. He started out as that power, run game, and then he switched, spread it out a little bit as the offenses opened up. Then he came back to his thing. But as far as completely changing like their identity of their offense and their philosophy about using transfers and things like that, Nick Saban is the only one that I've seen successfully truly flip that around. And Brian Kelly, same thing. He got it back on track, but it's just LSU is just Notre Dame. I mean, it's the same thing with a little bit better athletes. So can Mike actually change it? I don't know. What I'm hearing in the press conferences, I don't have a ton of confidence. But yeah, I think if you're going to see anybody go, Odell, Cannon, Dugans, and then you look at Thompson, possibly Surtain, possibly Yak. So there's your 6 guys. The first 4 most likely, but the other 2, Yak and Surtain, there's a chance they could be gone too. Because just like tight end with Thompson, running back, you got to slip somebody in there that could really recruit. And I like Yak, and I think he relates to the kids better than most of these guys on the staff, if I'm being honest. But he doesn't have that X factor to be a lead recruit. The fact that Alex Atkins is the best recruiter on the staff, and he's got all these recruits, that it makes that situation even tougher. But it just goes to highlight how poor this coaching staff is at just selling the program and just recruiting on, period. But anyways,